I'd like to thank all of the panel for joining us today. Like I say, for your time previously and for joining us on the panel. So today on the panel, I would like to introduce Kieran Walker. Kieran's from the Home Builders Federation. So thank you for joining us today. We have Warren Parsons joining us, and also Nick Horton from Sapphire Balconies, who did a very interesting talk today about the coach launch. We also have Andrew Parsons from Sapphire Balconies. Thank you for joining us today. And we have Jeff Pelger from MyDeck. So he'll be able to answer any questions that you all posed during the live stream. And Tony Ball from C3 Alliance. Thanks again for joining us. And again, a very interesting interview we had earlier from yourself. And we also have Gareth Dixon from Skies, and he's here to talk to us today about the resident's point of view, because Gareth has a lot of dealings with those actually use the end product. So yes, thanks a lot for joining us. I've got plenty of questions here that have been sent in from the viewers today. So we'll try to get through as many as possible. If we don't get through them all, then I will try to send them on to the relevant panel members and get the answers to you at a later date. So first of all, I'd just like to start with a question. I do believe it was for Kieran towards the beginning, but I think it might be something that's actually quite relevant to everyone. Do you think, and I think it's the big B word here, Brexit, will affect our supply of skilled workforce?
Good question. I think, to be honest with you, at the moment, that's anybody's guess.
Sorry, Kieran, I can't hear you at the moment.
Can't hear me. Okay.
That's just me. Oh, so carry on.
Yeah, okay, fine. All fun with this technology, isn't it? Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, it's anybody's guess what really is going to happen on the 1st of January. We've seen a number of proposals put forward for exemptions for specialist trades and suppliers, etc., being given an ability to remain working in the UK. You know, it comes as no surprise, I'm sure, to the audience and to the other panel members that the majority of our skilled workforce on building sites and construction generally is imported from Europe and further afield as well. I think we are maintaining a dialogue with governments, but I think, as anybody at the moment, we are still waiting to see a meaningful outcome from that, and hopefully before the end of the year we do see some clear policy direction on the import of foreign labour.
That's great, thank you. Did anyone else want to add to that question in their experiences?
I just from my side, I mean, I think we've seen a decline of the European labour through the last year or two since the announcement of sort of Brexit, and we're seeing a transition, people moving away, and I think that's fueling, you know, part of our discussions about off-site, modular, how we can do, you know, improve that efficiency. But certainly from my perspective, from the developments I've been involved in, we've kind of seen a migration of that trade, or that first wave of European worker who's now maybe moving back into Europe, where there is also some greater opportunities. So I don't know if you've sort of seen that, Kieran, or can sort of support that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely are seeing that. We're also seeing the marketplace moving towards an off-site stroke MMC approach as well. I think, you know, there's probably two factors to that, and that is, you know, the stringent housing targets we need to achieve, as well as the labour provision as well. I think they're two massive factors that, you know, that are going to shape, you know, how we even look at approaching this future home standard that's coming up in the next few years as well.
That's great, thank you guys. There was kind of another question that come in that kind of leads on from that. With these kind of potential shortages, how can we encourage people into these kind of skilled trades that we may be missing people on?
Is that for me, or is that
yes, mainly for you, I think, Kieran, but like I say, I will open it up to everyone.
Okay, well, very good question. We are doing a lot of work with our skills team and the Home Building Skills Partnership, and we've already got an apprenticeship bricklayer scheme set up. We've got a number of programs being set up for other skills: scaffolding, roofing, joinery, timber, carpentry, all those pieces as well. But, you know, this starts fundamentally with colleges and schools. It starts with enticing young people into construction to make sure that actually they see a route through construction and that there's a career there. You know, in the past we've had We've had younger people moving to other sectors because, you know, the thoughts of construction work doesn't always come with, you know, the frills and bows that other sectors do. But I think anyone now that has seen, you know, the work the Home Building Skills Partnership have done, the Future Talent Network that the HBF have done as well, we'll see that actually there's such diversity within the roles within house building alone, and you know, that's just one part of the construction sector. But actually, it's a very attractive proposition to go into construction, particularly at the moment as well, when you know, construction professionals are such sought after people as well in the industry.
Kieran, do you think there should be more of an initiative from the government to pick up on, I think, you know, as we're seeing at the moment through COVID, you know, a change of dynamics where people losing their jobs on the high street, you know, perhaps other industries where there's, you know, people, you know, unemployment coming out. To me, there's a lot of transferable skills in a short space of time that should be a real initiative to drive that back into the industry to fill some of this gap. Absolutely,
couldn't agree with you more. I mean, let's just take retail as a sector you mentioned there. You know, that fundamentally works harmoniously with the sales sector in the house building sector. You know, at the end of the day, it's point of sale, and it's selling a product to a consumer. So absolutely, yes. I think yes, government could do more. I think apprenticeship shouldn't be necessarily looked at in the way they used to be, just for, you know, hands-on manual skills. You know, I come from a house building background, as you're probably aware, as a technical director for a number of PLC large house builders, and you know, we talk about skill shortages on trades on site, but actually there are skill shortages in management roles as well. So technical managers, surveyors, site managers, you know, actually white collar staff as well. Because, you know, the quantum of them just isn't coming through from colleges, from universities, because they're going into other sectors. So I think yes, I'd like to see more government intervention there. I'd like to see more, you know, more ability for transferable skills to be brought into our sector quickly. You know, you referenced it, the retail sector has had probably one of the worst years on record, certainly from a high street perspective. And you're absolutely right, you know, transferable skills are there, ready and waiting for us to, you know, to make the most of. And there's a lot of people out there who are very good and very skilled at what they do. And, you know, we should be making the most of that.
That's great, thank you. Did anyone, like from Sapphire, have anything that they'd like to add to that about, you know, taking on people, training and things like that?
I guess many of us, myself included, have been here since education for a while, and I think the things, I guess generally amongst people, perhaps my age group and people younger coming into the industry, early doors, perhaps see it as a bit of a dirty trade of kind of being up to your knees in mud and so on. I think it's quite interesting what you talk on there, Kieran and Tony. I know we talked about this in the interview. As more MMC and so on is adopted, construction is not actually that, you know, mortar and sand beneath your fingernails. It's actually much more about constructing something you can be proud of. And I think one of the things which, speaking from early days, is it was always quite impressive to me being able to be part of something which could be seen and you can be proud of ultimately. But I think there is a perception piece there probably as well. I don't know, Andrew, you've obviously recruited many young people over the years throughout the company. You're on mute.
Something we believe in passionately as a company is training people for a lifelong project. So they can come up through the ranks, and they're the best people to retain in the business. It's not that other skills aren't brought in where they're needed, but there's something very good about someone who's been with you a long time. That's all I need to say.
Kelly, I've got a comment to make on that. I think obviously there's a lot of change about in the construction industry currently. And if we look at the talk of the golden thread, and we look at the way fire risk is now treated, there's a massive need for additional skills that perhaps weren't as needed before. So, for example, people with 3D CAD and BIM will increase as the golden thread increases, and the government initiative to start training fire assessors, obviously reactive, but still another area where skills are quite lacking. And I think as the industry transforms into more off-site type approaches, more and more opportunity is going to arise for a broader range of people to get involved, younger people as well, to get involved in construction. And so the old dirty perception might change quite rapidly.
I think there's a huge misconception around the industry. People unfortunately see the local builder or the poor builder they sell on the corner, or understand it as bricks and mortar and up to mud. And there is a degree of that, and there is a need for those trades. There's no doubt about it. And certainly building sites, in my career over the last 25 years, have become a lot more cleaner, safer places to work than they certainly was when I started off, and that's all for the better. I feel there's a real misconception around schools and colleges, and probably starting from the schools and the colleges, about what a career in construction can bring. The dynamics, the complexities, some fantastic engineering skill set, managerial, and everything that you can be done in creating some of these fantastic structures that we do. And I just, and I look at it and can relate to my son who's just coming out from school and gone into college. And, the advice that they get, not just in our sector, but broad and even in other sectors, I don't think, particularly in the construction side, does us justice. There's a lot of discussion about apprenticeships and maybe the bricklaying and carpentry. I don't think there's enough, and I'll go to this support to what Kieran's saying, enough about almost the other skill sets and trades and almost, white collar work that's involved, and the complexities and skill set and where that can take you, not only in the country, but around the world.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and like I said, it's almost like a change of perceptions needed to draw these people in. So that's great. Thanks, guys, for that. Now, the next question that we've got would be, will energy efficiency become even more important in 2021? And how big of an impact will this have on design and build? It doesn't say who it's to. It's kind of an open question, I believe.
Shall I field that then?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Short answer is massive, absolutely massive. The Part L&F consultation that closed earlier this year is a game changer. Make no bones about that. We are still waiting for the consultation response from government. It was due in autumn. It's December now, so obviously we are hoping to see that before the end of the year. Anyone that read the consultation can clearly see the direction of travel of government. We've seen in recent weeks the announcement from government for the 10-point plan, which included actually bringing back the 2025 future home standard from 2025 to 2023. We'll just add there that was then withdrawn from documents 90 minutes after it was published. In addition to that, the statement that 600,000 heat pumps a year will be installed in new properties from now to 2028. They are big aspirations, and anyone that works in construction and house building will know that actually that will require for us to reach either a 20% or a 31% reduction in energy emissions, will require an overhaul of what we do on our core product, be it fabric improvements, through your insulation, through your wall thicknesses, your building materials, glass, windows, the whole piece, right through to decentralized renewables such as heat pumps, so ground source, air source, photovoltaics, all those pieces as well. It's a major change, and there are other facets and other factors that will have a bearing on that. And if we just took alone heat pumps, the productivity and the output from that particular market at the moment is not anywhere near where it needs to be. So it needs to ramp up very, very, very quickly, almost exponentially overnight. Electrical capacity in the grid is a big factor and a big concern to our industry. We've got a new building regulation coming in next year, Part S, approved document Part S, which will cover electric vehicle charging points on every new dwelling. You add that to the future home standard, that there's some concerns there with energy clashes. You've also got to think back to the last conversation, skills. The house of tomorrow and the years after that is going to be very different to what it has been in the last 5, 10, 15 years in terms of the skills sector, which does drive the industry, I think, largely towards this MMC offsite piece, because a lot of it can be constructed in factories, the quality control is there, but also, you know, the commissioning and calibration piece as well. You know, the skills piece is big. I think last year we had 9,000 heat engineers in the UK in all sectors. You know, to get anywhere near the targets we're looking at in future years, we're going to need to, again, invest exponentially through investment, through apprenticeships, through skills, you know, skills programs, to actually get that many heat engineers in the country able to fit heat pumps, just the residential sector as well. So, yeah, to revert back to the original question, it's a massive change. We are likely to see a building regulation, so new Part L and F, towards the end of Q2, we feel, next year. We're likely to see similar arrangements to the Welsh proposal, which is a 2-year transitional period. But again, this is all very much caveated with the fact that until government announced officially what's going on with that, we don't fully understand exactly.
I think one thing we're quite good at in the industry and the media, which covers the architectural press and the construction press generally, is talking about ramping up and the need for X number more bricklayers or this many more plumbers and so on. But I think this is where, in my mind, innovation and changing things is where that really lies, in the fact that if you can create clever things, it's a completely different skill set from what is needed to actually fit things on site, but can massively make an impact on what's being done. And certainly from a digital world, it's interesting seeing this year more and more people adopting the whole approach to BIM and embracing that more holistically. But I'd be interested in your take on that, Kieran, as well. But certainly digital tools have got to play a role in actually changing what's actually being looked at, rather than just looking and saying we needed 10,000 to build this many, so we're going to need 20,000 to build double as many. It's much more about if we can build smarter. And the thing which keeps coming back to mind is that modernise or die report of Mark Farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think BIM and effectively MMC offsite construction go hand in hand anyway. You know, there's a lot of what we do as an industry, whether you've got one badge on or another, it's very much the same in terms of the process. So from buying the land right through to selling it to a customer and then turning the key, it's a very much a similar process. Everyone has their different foibles and their different ways of doing things, and that's fine. But I think you're right, innovation is the key to this, because, you know, we have an overarching target of 300,000 homes a year. And, you know, there's a certain element of that will be delivered through affordable housing, and a certain amount through open market housing. You know, there's different niches in the sectors of tall buildings, you know, semi-urban developments, urban developments, and rural developments as well. But I think you're right. You know, CAD, BIM, you know, digital construction, there's definitely a need for that. You know, would I see it being a stoic, you know, call upon for low-rise traditional housing? Maybe, but more in kind of where you're being innovative, where it's non-standard product, where it's bespoke, and certainly when you're doing tall buildings and frames, etc. I think definitely there's a call for BIM and digital construction there as well. You know, if you look at it just from the developer or the construction sector, it's useful. If you look at it from the end user perspective or facilities management, it's incredibly useful to, you know, to understand the maintenance of your building, to be able to reorder and schedule information, and maintain the building appropriately as well. And, you know, that does feed into fire, doesn't it? Understanding what's in the building, what's on the building, and what requires replacing on the building as well is, you know, it's part of the golden thread.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. So I've got a question here for Jeff. I think others might have something to say on it as well. Jeff, do you think this safety bill will give everyone the push needed to get these safety issues sorted sooner rather than later?
I hope so. I certainly think it will help. And what we've seen recently is, as I said in my interview, call to action, if you want. A lot of people starting to realize that there's no shortcuts or no easy way around getting your building safe, and it's got to be done, and it's got to be done in the right way. And unfortunately, that usually means spending quite a bit of money, but it's a transition we have to go through, and a lot of people are realizing that there's no choice in the matter now.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a question here for Warren and Nick. How does Coach work with BIM? Is it just models for Rivet, or is it more of the BIM info?
At the moment, we're the ability to download a Revit model, so you can configure your balcony within Coach and then download the Revit model to build into your, the IFC model to add into your building Revit model. We're looking at potentially further adaptations and building information, building in some of the metadata in the future, but right at the moment it's just a dumb BIM model.
The other part of that is obviously the future side of things, and one thing which is interesting, we're part of the BIM for Housing group representing manufacturers, and there's a conversation yesterday actually about fire and the golden thread, and one of the things which was pointed out in the document is about the need for digital record keeping, and this is back to that conversation I think you touched on it, Kieran, about actually having a traceable history all the way through, and that's just as much as of BIM as the actual modelling of something in 3D as well, obviously. But I think the future side of the thing, the exciting thing about tools like Coach and others is the fact of being able to provide that fully traceable history. We've got a passport for the quality checking already at the moment, but in future, as you said, Kieran, touching on that, sort of feeding back information to the residents and so on.
Thank you very much. So I have a question here for Andrew. What guidance should I take into account to be compliant with drainage regulations?
Sorry about that. Drainage regulations for balconies have been quite difficult to follow in the past. So the new BS 8579 gives a lot of clarity to that. It points you to the correct codes, but also introduces for the first time the idea of eaves drainage, which is very popular for balconies these days, because really the main purpose of any drainage balconies is to get the water away from the building. If the balconies weren't there, the water would be falling anyway. So normally the ground can absorb it without any problem. It's the protection of the building that's the key issue. So the concept of controlled or eaves drainage does that, and it gets the water well away from the building. And that, because balconies tend to be stacked, there's very little water that falls on them typically anyway.
Thank you. And I did have another one here just about that, so before I move on. What key parts of the future home standards should I be aware of?
Was there any more to the question of that as to which?
No, that's all they've put, sorry.
Well, certainly accessibility is something that's very becoming important. It's not, this country's in the forefront of that. I mean, we deal in Canada, for instance, where they still typically have steps up to the balconies, which make them very inaccessible for wheelchair users, for example. But accessibility, designing for security as well. I don't know, Nick, is there anything else you can think of to answer that question?
I think the distinction between balconies and terraces has been something in the BSA 579, which has recently been clarified. I think this goes back to a point, Tony, you were talking about, was supply chain engagement early on, and the fact is that nobody designing buildings and so on is going to be able to remember all the different parts of it, and this is where you need that that collaboration you're talking about, Tony, at an early stage, to make sure you're picking up those pieces, certainly from a balcony viewpoint, but from every product as well.
Yeah. I mean that, you know, my view and concept, and has been through my career. I think from design team, design consultants, it's very difficult to be up to date with every code, product, initiative, innovation that's happening. And certainly the success that I've had in schemes and delivering and designing schemes in the previously and currently at the moment is by bringing in key engagement with the supply chain, manufacturers and specialists when required through the design. And I think there's that influence is huge. And I think that also knits back in very well, we've spoken about, into this sort of whole golden thread, bringing in the right products, designing around the product, designing around the system, ensuring the testing's in place. And then I think that's a robustness in building design that then leads to greater quality on the outset, but also in relation to certainty when it comes to when you're a contractor that you're building. And I think we have to be guarded and about the late substitution of product and value engineering. To me, it's about designing right from the beginning, getting things correctly, designing it efficiently, so you don't realise, because let's be honest, the majority of value engineering comes in when it's a realisation something either can't be built or it's over budget or both, and then thereon tries the late rally round. And actually, if you can get these things right done earlier, it leads for a lot smoother process to start that journey of construction.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next question that I've had come through was for Jeff. What are the different types of non-combustible decking that you provide? Are there any disadvantages of these versus timber decking? Example, weight or cost?
Yeah, our boards, the different boards that we provide are focused on what they're going to be used for in terms of the difference between kind of new build and refurbishment. So we've got boards that are easier to install in a site environment, for example. And then we've got boards that use a clip system, which are more appropriate for terraces. We've tried to think of all the different applications on a building, and the design of our boards and our substructures and our clip systems have been driven by that. For example, on high-rise buildings, the use of clips is not ideal because of the risk of them falling down and dropping down below. So we've got a non-clip system board that works very well for that. But we've also got associated products which generally make balconies safer. For example, our furniture anchor is a good example of stopping furniture blowing off, which is actually now part of the new British standard as well. So we've been driven by that. Not sure if that answers the question fully.
Yeah, there was one that kind of followed on from it. It says, could wood grain decks be a problem if people are nervous of it burning, even if it doesn't?
It's the first time I've been asked a question like that. No, it can't be a problem because there's no difference in the wood grain makeup in terms of its combustibility versus an ordinary board that doesn't look like wood grain. It's just almost like a tattoo effect on the board that gives it the impression that it is wood from a distance. So it looks very nice, but it behaves in exactly the same way that a standard aluminium decking board would behave. Yeah.
So I presume it's just more a case of residents being informed that it may look like it, but it's not actually. I suppose that's probably as well where the golden thread comes in, that information being passed on.
Yeah, if for example, if on some of the buildings where we are installing wood grain, you could envisage people getting nervous about timber decking going down on the wall of a building, and yeah, then it's communication. But I'm sure they'd be relieved when they find out that it's not actually wood. I think it'd be a nice problem for us to have.
That's a communication issue that often happens from the managing of buildings that goes on with managing agents and the communication with the residents that sit within it, not just on the decking, but all round. But I think that's where those points probably need to be better correctly addressed, because there's a lot of misunderstanding and apprehension probably incorrectly caused.
Yeah, absolutely. I think resident communication is a big topic. I think Gareth is going to talk a little bit about that, but just going back to the other part of the question in terms of the comparison between traditional boards and aluminium decking, I think the key advantages of aluminium relate to the sustainability of the product. It's recyclable, so it's a much better product from a future perspective. In terms of its durability and its design life is far superior to a lot of the timber decking and composites that are on the market, and that's aside from the non-combustibility properties that it has. So yeah, what you're actually getting when you replace your decking is a far superior product on the building.
Thank you. Kieran, did you want to mention something?
Yeah, I was just going to come in on the point on communication. I mean, it's about purchase, it's about building owners, but it's also about the lending community as well. And I should imagine most people on this call have heard of an EWS1 form, and the issues that has brought about because the context in which that's used, the communication and actually people understanding what it is they're supposed to be assessing is a massive factor here and can cause a stalemate, a bottleneck, and a hold up in lending and the actual property transaction as well. And again, that's where BIM would more than pay its weight back in gold. Just understanding that it's a composite system or it's a non-combustible material, particularly as we're seeing, with the building safety bill on buildings over 18 meters. There's a void beneath that of buildings between, let's say, 9 to 11 meters up to that 18, and we're hopefully going to see some revised EWS1 proposals in the new year as well. So big factor there.
The question primarily was obviously seemed like it was from a resident point of view, perhaps, but do you think the same problem may lie there in the EWS forms you're talking about there, Kieran? When people are assessing an external walling system and so on, do you think there's also perhaps an education piece back to the insurers and so on, rather than necessarily just the end resident?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we HBF are working with the RICS, UK Finance, and fire engineers and the lending community in the inception of the EWS1. It all comes down to risk and liability, but I think education is a massive factor here. People understanding what it is they're assessing and actually getting out there and looking at it, because I mean, a lot of people, I should imagine, a lot of people going out to do a survey of a building from a valuation perspective could look from ground floor up to 4 stories and think that's timber cladding on the wall, or it's timber decking on a balcony, without actually looking at it properly and understanding what's actually there, or the potential options that it could be something that's non-combustible there. So yeah, education is a massive piece. I think it does rely on pragmatism as well, certainly from the lending community. And I think there's also a bigger factor here, which will involve me going off a tangent, and I won't, around the PI of fire engineers and assessors and completers of EWS1 forms as well.
That's great, thank you. So I have a question next for Tony. Tony, product interfaces is mainly talked about at stage 3. Are you suggesting collaboration around the process too, which isn't so much an architect consideration?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think the bringing together, I mean, the junction of materials, how the building interfaces, key junctions, I talk about stage 3. I think there's an inventation of it being brought in at stage 2, when you're considering about the choice of materials and your building design. I think if we really start to get into the detail and integrating how that works and the combined performance into stage 3. To me, you can't put a blanket over this. Each scheme's different. Every scheme's unique. Every building's got its own challenges from what it's brought with. But I think it's, to me, engaging with the specialists who know their product, know the performance of their product, combined with the design team and look into what they've achieved, that's what brings success. I think too often there's missing gaps. And if I'm honest, I was being critical of some of the sort of design community. I think that there's usually a bubble wrapped around some of the difficulties that are a little bit difficult, details that are difficult to achieve, and they're called contractors' design. And I think there needs to be a little bit more ownership there, and actually on those key junctions, how they work. Because, and I'm sure Kieran would agree with this, with his work from a technical side, that really is the success and where the devil in the detail is. And I think too often this sort of CPD or contractors' design is becoming a bit of an overused sort of term and phrase.
That's great, thank you. I have another question here on Coach. So will Coach work with projects, with more than one balcony design?
Yeah, so that our previous version that cabs that was live was just an individual balcony on its own. But one of the big features that we've now brought in is that you can build up to 30 different balcony types, collate them together in a single project. So that can be multiple specifications, multiple sizes, multiple shapes, etc. And some of the extra features we're looking to design in the near future is the ability to do corners and multiple lift balconies, all designed as a single units to make it as easy as possible. But it's very much around bringing those all into a single project and then get the benefits of collating those together.
Great.
Nick, on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking the ability is there and the tool to design 30, but that doesn't mean people should design 30 even if they've got a larger scheme. And this is something which, you know, the detailing Tony was just talking about there is we certainly want to be nailing down some of those details, but one of the things, certainly the penetration through from a balcony point of view, other trades would have similar issues as well, but nailing down that detail and having a I don't know if others can hear an echo, but I can. Having the I'll try and keep it short. Nailing down the penetrations for a building, getting that right as a standard detail, and then applying that to different areas and tweaking the balcony shape, sizes, and so on is a much easier thing than if you're continually changing the details, which actually where you've got penetrations through the building and so on. So it's key consideration to look at that, because that will standardizing those details will obviously make a big difference to balcony package cost, but also all the knock-on consequences, those waterproofing around it, thermal side of things, the facade finishes and so on.
That's great, thank you. It's kind of leading on from that. It says Coach seems like a great digital tool. Do you think that digital will be driving construction in 21?
Sorry, I think Tony was about to jump in and.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I thought you was going to go first, Nick. I mean, it's going to increase. Whether drive it, I think, is a word, but I think we're going to see an increased adoption. I think there are tools, and we speak about Coach and other tools that are coming out, which I think are making some of the design decisions or influencing design decisions and making them a lot easier to understand and drive those efficiencies. You know, I still think to a degree we're at the infancy and people understanding and delivering on some of the understanding digitally properly. You know, we talked about BIM. That come in a wave, it went away again, it's come back in again in a slightly different form. You know, I kind of agree with Kieran. I think it's got its place. It's not for every scheme and every project and every type. I think there's other tools that are more simplistic that are coming in that we're starting to see use. So I think you'll see an increased adoption. I wouldn't necessarily say drive. That might be different in a few years' time, but I think you're going to start to see that adoption become greater in schemes.
I think there's a couple of points there from 2020 which we can see. One is that, you know, the whole fact that we've had to social distance and many of us have been working from home. Certainly from my point of view, I've been in probably about 8-9 times into the office since March. But all this has led to more digital adoption throughout the whole industry. That in itself, and also the golden thread and the recommendations and having to do something around digital information. We've always been very good at the paper tick sheets and so on in construction and so on, but that naturally is going to move us more into the digital world. I think the point you focused on there, Tony, as to driving the industry, I think the more collaborative people are in the way tools are working and how they can work that together is really what's going to change it from just being adopted naturally, organically, and actually driving the change in the industry.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what doesn't help and what didn't help with BIM is everybody working off of different platforms and different software and that interface and usability that goes on. So I think there's got to be some standards kind of set and achieved, like a platform that people work to, and that will certainly assist that adoption.
Kieran, from a developer's point of view, how much of the industry do you think are seeing it as a key driver at the moment?
I think, you know, as Tony mentioned, driver is a quite emotive word, I think. Am I seeing a wholesale uptake of BIM and digital construction across the industry? Yes, absolutely. A number of developers are using it to drive their off-site construction, their MMC piece. It's not across the board. It's not, you know, it's not wholesale. It's not mainstream just yet. But we are seeing a lot of the, you know, traditional house builders, the PLC names you'll see out there, using BIM and using digital construction on their housing portfolios going forward as well, because there is definitely a synergy between efficiency and digital construction. There absolutely is. You know, if you're building that house type in Newcastle or in Newquay, you know, you're doing the same. The variables are, you know, the exposure and the ground generally. You know, maybe the feed-ins that come off the site as well, but largely it's the same thing. So actually, there's definitely, you know, a need and a call for it. To say it's being driven by house builders and developers, I'm not sure I would agree with that at the moment. I think once we see a more wholesale uptake of MMC and offsite construction, which I do generally predict in the next few years, I think we'll see most developers, if not all, on, you know, some kind of digital construction or BIM format.
Sorry, thank you. I think it kind of was mentioned there a couple of times, and then it's been mentioned a bit earlier as well, about the ways that working has changed during COVID. We have got a question along those lines of looking at the ways we've been working. Looking at the ways we have been working having changed due to all that came into place with COVID. Do you see these changes staying and like changing the ways of working? For example, you know, more people working from home and changes of working on sites, maybe more off-site type construction. Can you see that being a long-term change? I think that's kind of open for everyone because everyone works in different fields. So Nick, first, do you see that as being a change in your kind of area?
Yeah, I can't see myself going up to Scotland to work with a design meeting or a CPD anymore. There's a lot more virtual things happening, and it is driving efficiency in itself. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones from my point of view, probably echoed in most people across the industry, I would have thought, is having design meetings and actually being able to call in more relevant people much easier than it was, rather than people having to drive around the country.
Tony, have you seen a change you think is going to stay?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen. I think what's happened over the last year has kind of brought forward probably where we were going over the next 10 years. It's kind of, you know, brought that forward back 10 years to where we are now, and some of the practices of remote working, flexible working. You know, I don't think it replaces some great things we've talked about meetings and traveling and bringing people together. Still don't think it misses some of the face-to-face interaction and decision making and how you form relationships with people, which is really important. I think an interesting fact to me, slightly away from our way of working, is in talking to a number of contractors and developers out there, is that where we've had to have a restricted numbers of workers and people on site, to my mind, it's brought almost an increased efficiency, where you've had to actually plan work out properly, do it in a proper sequence, think about what you're doing, segment work off, bring different trades in. And actually, when you start talking to a number of these sort of developers and contractors now, they're actually as efficient in what their outputs are with less people on site than what they were previously. So, yeah, I think sometimes, and I think that's an interesting dynamic that will stay and people will look at as they sort of come on and move forward. Like I say, I think embedded into us, it's going to change completely all of our lives. And when I have my sort of sales hat on and look at what we're delivering, I think it means a big, you know, difference in that world as well, to where you actually have to live in relation to your work. If you was having to commute into the office every day and you was working into a city, you had to be in a commuter zone. If that's going to be a change in how often you're there, remote working, I think that's a really interesting dynamic for where we see sort of house building on people's homes moving as well in the future. So I think wholesale changes that will stay with us going forward.
I think to go on from what,
sorry, Warren,
from what Tony said, it's people embracing the helping hands and the use of technology, the use of physical technology. So as Tony said, a two-man team for plasterboarding, for instance, is now one man with a bit of mechanical equipment, and the same with on the factory floor. Of a two-man team is replaced by one man and a bit of robotic equipment. So it's that whole alignment between technology and people to facilitate and allow people to do things differently. But robots and bits of kit don't have sick days and time off, so can increase the efficiency that way.
Yeah, I would mirror everything that's been said. And in addition, on sites, when I do go to site visits, obviously there's the point Tony made about efficiency of numbers in terms of, say, a 5-man team instead of a 10-man team. There's also only critical site staff tend to be on the sites now, and I think that's another lesson that's been learned is, if you don't need to be on the site, if you could be in an office or at home or remote, it's a much more, currently it's much safer, but it's also more efficient to do it that way. From that perspective, I support what's been said. And in my experience over this past year, I've been amazed at how productive the team that I'm in has actually become, which I'll be honest, I didn't expect it initially. Thought we'd have productivity issues, but we've become more productive. It feels like we work more, but we've got more time in our hands now for personal things. I know it's not always the case because you get stuck you get caught up in the trap of not watching the clock and working too late. But if you have a good discipline, I think the productivity numbers have gone through the roof in terms of what we get done now. And that's mainly because we're not wasting time traveling and commuting and doing things like that.
Okay, thank you. Kieran, did you want to add? I saw you agreeing.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think one of the key findings, and just to echo what Tony's and others have said there, is what we have found from our members as soon as we put the safe working charter in place and we've seen safe working protocols on site. In the past, we've seen, and I'm being extreme here to make the example, we've seen the window fitter in at the same time as the painter and the floor layer and the kitchen fitter. And because of those safe working protocols and those bubbles and that, that distancing, what we're actually seeing is trades going in, doing the job properly and giving themselves the set amount of time they need to allow for following trades to come in as well. And that is bringing massive efficiencies to our members. And actually, they're now looking at their critical paths and their programs and seeing differences in that as well. Because I think subcontractors are actually on board with this as well. But the other one that I wanted to mention that we haven't spoken about is actually within this new digital world post-pandemic, we've also seen the planning system be reformed as well. We've seen a planning white paper come through, and I won't sort of drill into that, but having seen online planning committees now being held for major applications is a pretty big step forward for what is historically been quite a bureaucratic process. And I think seeing that now coming forward, it expedites the process. I won't say it's made it easier, but it certainly expedites the process. Anyone that works in construction and design knows how difficult that is. But it's certainly, rather than having to wait for committee rooms to be free, wait for all members to be able to attend on that date, actually being able for them to access from home and to attend an online event or a committee meeting and a hearing has sped up the process as well. And I think there's some definite learnings there.
They were very slow on the uptake, weren't they, Kieran? Which I think frustrated everyone to start off with, and some that will remain nameless are still very slow on the uptake and embracing the technology. But I hope that stays.
Yeah,
because I think it has brought an efficiency and an engagement to it, particularly when you talk about even some of the early stages when you have pre-application meetings and that you can get that. That's an efficiency that should stay. I mean, my only, I think, negative against this, the way we're working, to me, it's about people work best with people, and this industry works best with people. And I think there's a fine line of where we've gone from, which we've survived, which has been great, but it's bringing back, it's finding a balance between the two. And I am a little bit concerned when I see some of our schemes, probably a little bit of silos being created, going back again, where we actually brought a lot of people working closer together. Yeah. It's easier to get in a silo that when you're not having to engage. And so I think we've just got to get back to find a happy medium and balance in over the next year and onwards.
Great. Andrew, did you want to add anything? I know you mentioned earlier about Sapphire being able to continue to stay productive during this time. Do you think Sapphire's had any real learnings from it?
No, I just echo what everyone said, that I think we've seen things becoming more efficient, and but we do need to get back together again once in a while, and we've got that planned as soon as we can.
Great, thank you. Kind of leading on to there, Gareth, I did have a question for you. Do you feel that after COVID, the demand for outside space and high-rise living will increase?
Yeah, I do, Kelly, very much so. And I was just going to chip in on that previous question to take it in a slightly different direction from the residents' point of view. So many of these people that are working from home now are living in these apartments that we're talking about building. And I think a lot of consideration needs to go in not only the outdoor space, but also the indoor design to facilitate that. We've seen a lot of residents really struggling, particularly where they're cohabiting. So that's quite a trend in London and other cities at the minute, where people are renting together for the sake of spreading the cost, etc. Not necessarily in the same family. They could be working completely different environments, and to be all crammed together in one open plan space could be quite a challenge. So I'd like to see a bit more flexibility introduced to allow home working, if that's outdoors in the in the better weather, then albeit, but also indoors, and allowance for plenty of lighting, all that kind of thing. All the kind of trends that we saw, I suppose, over the last 10 years in commercial premises design, where layouts were flexible and it was task-based rather than being stuck at the same desk. We probably need to, in a smaller scale, be thinking about those kind of changes in the home environment as well, if we're going to continue to be really effective in working from home.
I think you're going to see that coming through, Gareth, and certainly all the schemes I'm involved with design now. The adaptation of home working, if not designated space, certainly giving flexible use for bedrooms, flexible design use around other spaces in sort of dining rooms. I've always had an issue that we, certainly in this country, we designate use of rooms for sort of their one use. We can't think about flexible uses of spaces, and in the design. And I think this is, needs to make us think about that. I also think, there's going to be a big drive now about the Wi-Fi and connectivity, and about that, how we bring in that Wi-Fi to the bringing in that sort of fibre to the property. The speeds that we're working on. There's going to be a whole set of different demands that's going to come from end users, and I think house builders and developers have got to respond to that, because I think those who are not, I think, could have problems, but those who are, I think they're going to bring on these points. Certainly if I was looking at buying a new house over the next year, I'd have a whole probably set of different considerations in my mind than what I would have done starting off from the year previous. Going back to the balcony scenario, there's also lots of developers now who are thinking about not just what do I put on as a minimum, what's a minimum space. I think certainly on apartment blocks, trying to how they can make that a real usable space, how you can get more out of that balcony and more of that space outside, which I don't think always has been high on the criteria, but certainly again from a sales perspective, that is coming up on high on people's agendas when they're coming in to look at these apartment living.
Yeah, that's good. Tony, it is interesting when we've been looking at other cultures and other countries, and if you take somewhere like Canada, where they don't always have great weather, I think the UK, we tend to write ourselves off, say, well, it's always raining, so we can't use the balcony. Well, it's not that great in Canada at times, but their average balcony size was twice what the UK balcony size was. And that's not just everything being big in North America. I think it's a recognition of the benefits they bring. And I think the changes that people have made in their lifestyle over the last 6 to 8 months, they've realised that there are better ways of doing things. But there are challenges, which is good to hear you say they're being addressed. That's brilliant.
That's great, thank you. I think we've all seen great initiative from residents on how to use their balconies over time, and I'm sure the guy that ran the marathon around his balcony would appreciate a bigger balcony. So yeah, it's great to hear that has all been taken into account.
Don't tell the managing agent about that. They're often the ones who stop us having the use of the balconies. But and that's another perception that probably needs to change in some of those restrictions, because that's where I think you could do more out on the balcony, but often you have that sort of guideline and restriction. But that's probably another conversation again.
It's really good, Tony, and I fully agree. Rather than banning things, why don't we find a new way of doing them so they are safe and people can enjoy themselves?
Andrew, is there anything discussed in the committee about the potential changes in balcony use and making that standard to BS 8579 more future-proof?
No, the size of the balcony didn't particularly come up to my recollection, apart from the London Housing Design Guides and so on, which obviously relate to the size of the apartment. I don't know, Kieran, if there's any move afoot to review those upwards.
Not specifically balconies, but I mean, an overarching piece of work is the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission, which again forms part of the planning white paper and white paper reforms that are coming through. So that there is a need to, I think, improve amenity space, be it open gardens, open space, or balconies. I don't necessarily work in the planning sphere, as it were. I'm more sort of on the technical side, but certainly I should imagine that's probably going to be addressed.
Great, thank you guys. I have another quick one here for you, Gareth. Someone, after watching your video, they're interested about the magic wand. Can you confirm what residents felt they needed extra space for? Was it a specific use? It kind of goes with what we were just talking about.
Not necessarily specific, I don't think, Kelly, but I think it bears on what we've just said, that an average balcony in the UK is about 4 square metres or so. There's a limited amount of things you can do on that, especially if you have more than one person living in the flat. So it was all around just needing a bit more space, not loads more, but especially if they've only got a Juliet balcony, for example. But also a lot of balconies are quite narrow. Some of them have a brick wall and that kind of thing. There's no kind of see-through balustrade, so it's very restrictive. No, it wasn't anything specific, except the main trend seemed to be growing and gardening. So that needs a little bit of space.
Great, thank you. So just conscious of time now, I do have a few more questions, but like I said, I will get these out to the panel members that they're relevant to and send them back to those that have asked them, so we can get all of the questions asked. I think we could spend a good another hour really talking about the future going forward, so which is great. But I would like to end quickly, if we can, on just everyone could give one bit of information or one thing they think is really relevant or upcoming in 2021, like something you think is the next thing, kind of thing. So Jeff, did you want to say? I know you've got new products being launched. I think that as actually has been mentioned, someone's seen something on LinkedIn about your one of your products that have just been launched with the so I can't see where it is now. The anchors, your furniture anchors. So obviously you've got lots in development. So have you got anything that you particularly like to put forward as the next thing for 2021?
Yeah, I think that, as I said in my interview, 2021 is going to be a year of action versus the contrast of 20, which has been a year of delays and frustration. So unleash, for us, it's just going to be unleashing the shackles and flying forward, and diving into loads of new opportunity.
Great, thank you. In no particular order now, Kieran, have you got anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think we've got 4 major pieces of primary legislation due to arrive with us as an industry in the next 12 months. Building Safety Bill, Part LNF of the building regulations. We've got a new electric vehicle charging point regulation. We've also got an accessibility consultation for approved document Part M. Those 4 factors alone are major game changers for the way we design, build and occupy houses or buildings going forward.
Great, thank you, Kieran. Warren?
So one of the key things for us is bringing more options to the marketplace. So we're our Innovast team are heavily working on trying to bring in some new both product innovation and business method innovation, new ways to install balconies, ways to do things faster. But fundamentally, it's about embracing change and being prepared that we've had a big shake up this year, but I'm sure there's lots more things that we can change if we're prepared to look outside and prepared to be have the world turned upside down and continue moving forward fast, I think.
Great, thank you. Gareth?
For me, Kelly, I'd love to find a way to increase this engagement with the residents and the industry, if you like. There often seems to be this kind of black hole in the middle where there's scope for a lot more education, a lot more communication, like was said before, about misconceptions about materials and products and even practices. So education of residents as to good things to do and things to avoid on balconies, etc., would be really good. And if we can find a great platform on a forum to do that and work together with the industry, that'd be a really good step forward, I think.
That's great, thank you. And Andrew?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to see more next year is further increase of safety. I know we've made great strides in the industry over the last years, but I think that there's still a way to go, and some of the innovations that we've got currently to further enhance the safety on site in installation of balconies. Some of the things that we've become used to working under crane loads and so on really aren't fit for the 21st century. So I think we need to continue to innovate in that regard. I'd like to see some more changes in that.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And Tony?
Not wishing to be too downbeat on a quite positive call, but I feel we're in for a tough year next year, because and I think resilience is the word, because I think there's definitely going to be an increase in the volumes, and I think there's going to be work, but we're on the back of Brexit. We're going to have lots of changes in regulation coming through. We've got a change in sort of in workforce. We've got a different dynamic with off-site, and I think we're in this sort of transitional period, which is very good. But I think there's got to be, it's going to be a challenging year, but we've just got to continue to work together. I would say work, collaboratively together and keep the communication going. But I think there's positive, but I think it's going to be a tough year, and sort of resilience is going to be key again.
Great, thank you, Tony. And Nick?
I think, as Kieran referred to, there's a lot of new regulations coming in. I do think that's probably what's more going to drive change. There is lots of things we've talked about during this conversation already, the MMC and adopting of it, BIM, and other better practice and efficiencies and all the innovation which comes with that. I think that's going to continue building momentum on there. I think one thing we're noticing also, aside of that, I guess it probably relates slightly to the Part L on the other regulations you mentioned as well, Kieran, in relation to being more sustainable, is that whole piece around the whole carbon side of things. And I think we're going to be seeing more activity there generally as an industry. It does seem to be gathering pace as well. And if I was writing a little wish list of things for next year as well, I'd definitely add clarity from the MHCLG about the laminate glass. It'd be good to see that come back in. It's been an issue now for just over 2 years. There's lots of lights we've seen at the end of the tunnel, but some have been switched off, others that still seem fairly endless and not really getting any closer.
Great, thank you. So thank you everyone on the panel today for joining us. It was great to have your interviews, and also for you to answer the questions from everyone that joined us to watch today. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everyone that came to view today and has been viewing the interviews over the past couple of days. I hope everyone managed to answer as many of the questions as possible. Like I said, if we do any ones that we do have, we will be asking the panel later, and we will send those answers to you. This is the final event for us this year for 2020. So thank you everyone that's joined us. We do have quite a few people that have followed us from our very first virtual. So thank you very much for that. If anyone has missed any of our virtual events, you can request to view them. So do go onto the ResiBuild website and put in a request there so you can watch all of our past events. We also are now taking our bookings for 2021 CPDs. So do look on there. January is filling up fast. So if you do want to get your team one of those, then please do make contact with me and I can arrange that for you. There's also the opportunity of getting a PPE pack. So if you would like a free PPE pack from Sapphire Balconies, it contains a face mask, a key and also hand sanitizer, then let us know. We can get one of those sent out to you. We do have a short poll. If you would give us some feedback, that's great. We do appreciate the feedback. We are continually looking at ways of improving our events. Obviously 2021, all the events are in planning. So if you want to have a look now on our website, the first of our events are on there. We will be continuing with virtual events to start with, but we are hoping, like you guys said, everyone likes the face-to-face still, so we want to get back to that, get that networking going again at some point. So later in 2021, we are hoping to have our first face-to-face event. So don't forget your face masks, and please do come and join us on those, and hopefully we'll recognise you all. We don't have camera recognition, so yeah, we won't be asking you to remove your masks so we can recognise who you are. So great, yes, thanks very much everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this event.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.